From mission revenge against his old rival, to pros predicting that he'd get that long overdue win, here's why Brandon Moreno is going to destroy Alexandre Pantoja. Firstly, because nothing gets you more motivated than revenge. Moreno has come a long way since his last fight against Pantoja, when he lost to him on UFC Fight Night in May 2018. Fast forward 5 years, and this is a totally different ballgame for both fighters. Moreno's improved significantly in the last half-decade or so, and while Pantoja isn't regressing either, this will be a fight that Brandon will back himself to win. Look, revenge is a big factor behind the appeal of the UFC itself, and it's not a surprise that Dana White and his men thought about pitting these two together given their history. It makes for a fight that everyone wants to see, and Moreno will be more than happy to put on a show, as he plans to quash the challenge that the Brazilian will offer. You see, the last time these two fought, Pantoja won the fight via unanimous decision, completely outfighting Moreno. He had no answers to the dominance that the Brazilian brought to the octagon. The cannibal landed 79 significant strikes on a young Brandon, with all the judges going heavily in favor of Pantoja for a well-deserved win.
And that was it. Alexandre gets the win.
Winner by rear naked choke, Alexandre.
That fight proved to be fatal for Moreno, who was cut from the division after losing back-to-back fights. This time, though, things couldn't possibly be any different. Not only is Moreno on a fabulous run since that loss back in 2018, but he's also the UFC flyweight champion. Oh yeah, that's actually a major reason why he's a heavy favorite ahead of this one. Moreno's absolutely dominated the division and also been involved in a famous trilogy against Davison Figueiredo, finally getting a win over him in UFC 283 by TKO. Now, he gets to defend his title against someone he's lost to twice. Yeah, caught you by surprise there, didn't I? Moreno and Pantoja have fought each other a total of 2 times. The first one was back in 2016. And while it was kind of an exhibition contest, fighters at this level do not like losing. They were fighting under the banner of the Ultimate Fighter, and Pantoja was the big favorite in that fight. Moreno showed flashes of brilliance, but this was back when he was in his early 20s and Pantoja was the #1 contender, so I don't blame him for going down that easily. The cannibal won that fight by submission, with Moreno paying the price for a lack of ground skills. The second time was when they met at the UFC in 2018, as we looked at a little earlier. But this time around, Moreno's clearly the favorite as the defending champ, and he'll be making sure to get his sweet revenge. That said, there are plenty of other reasons why the Assassin Baby will fancy his chances in this fight. Take his striking, for instance. If you remember watching Moreno fight in the 2F, you'd notice just how much his MMA game has improved since that time. The most recent leap he's taken has been as a stand-up fighter, adjusting his style ever so slightly to have the edge in terms of outboxing his opponents. Back then, Moreno relied a lot on his quick combination of punches to the head and body, but this, Brandon 2.0, stays well within his stance and knows exactly how to balance his exchanges. Don't get me wrong, there's no substitute for that youthful habit of lunging forward. It makes for so many exciting fights. And Moreno hasn't completely let go of that habit, he's just become more sensible in his approach. It allows him to eat far fewer counterpunches, and he can hold his own against savvier kickboxers, for instance. You'd think that someone who fights heavy on his leading leg could run into many issues, but you'd be very wrong. He's somehow way too good at avoiding damage to his leg, and that gives him the edge in landing those forward-leaning jabs. Check out his fight against Kai Kara-France. He's someone very well versed on fighting on his feet, and has an excellent mix of smart combos and distance management. Yet Moreno destroyed him with his jab, and all that happened so quickly that Kara-France had no confidence in his abilities anymore. Every time he'd spring forward to land a punch, Moreno would just pull his head back and fire back multiple punches. It was devastating. That's why I think he'll have the edge over Pantoja too, because the cannibal won't be able to deal with this evolved version of Moreno. In their last 2 fights, Moreno was just looking for that Hollywood haymaker to win him the bout. Against someone as experienced as Pantoja, that was a terrible game plan, which is why he lost both times in humiliating fashion, to say the least. He didn't look to set up any traps, and while he was successful in securing 2 takedowns, Pantoja had considerably more control on the ground. This time around, it doesn't look likely that Alexandre will get away with it. Moreno's been excellent since he returned to the UFC, and he'll be making Pantoja work really hard. Gone are his days of being an exciting but inexperienced fighter. This version of Moreno is just plain scary. Evolved striking, coupled together with superior wrestling, sign me up. the Assassin Baby is an effective takedown artist too. He was decent at carrying those moves out in his early days with the promotion, but he's only excelled in that department over time as well. What makes him so good is that Moreno goes about his business in a simple way. He doesn't overcomplicate anything, and that makes it very easy for him to take the fight to every kind of fighter. It's helped by the fact that Moreno has a size advantage in most of his fights, and he's got an insane amount of determination, which increases his effectiveness. Pantoja looked a little bit uneasy when blocking wider punches, and this is something I expect Moreno to capitalize on. Usually he relies on those wider punches as bait, but if the Brazilian tries to turn away, Moreno will do his utmost best to take away his back too and wrestle him to the ground. That'll be the end of the fight, because if Pantoja stands any chance of making it 3-0, he should try not to turn his back on it. That's going to be very hard to do though. The cannibal will feel he got a lot of success as a backpacking flyweight against him, but this new Moreno has improved his defense a lot. He knows how to break away, and because he never stops moving, he's a nightmare to keep under wraps. Plus, you factor in the intangibles, and Brandon's not someone you want to face. To me, the intangibles are the biggest reason why he'll defend his crown and also take his revenge on Pantoja. As good and experienced as the Brazilian is, he's not in his peak anymore, and he'll know that either of those two fights could have gone against him, if not for a bit of luck. This time around, Moreno's going to ensure that luck plays no part in the fight whatsoever, and the one thing that everyone admires about him is his sheer determination, willingness to work hard and never give up. Many have compared his story to the first Rocky film, and for good reason. He's got endless amount of heart and doesn't quite get those fairy tale endings that you get to see in most of the movies. He got his Rocky 1 story against Pantoja in their first fight, and now he'll be hoping to get his Rocky 2 moment by finally getting his revenge in UFC 290. Not to mention he's a crowd favorite too, and he'll have the T-Mobile Arena rooting for him. You can't beat crowd support, man. I know it might not account for much should Pantoja get a quick early win, but if the fight is a long drawn-out one, like their only official fight was, then I expect Moreno to receive a major boost. He's one of those fighters who are genuinely adored by fans, not in the way Conor McGregor was, but in the way where you just want Moreno to do well. He comes across as a nice fella too, and with crowd on his side, along with a fire burning inside him to get his long-due revenge, also the title on the line, I expect Moreno to emerge victorious. So do most of the pros. He's the betting favorite, and rightfully so, given his recent form. In fact, there's a 42% chance that Brandon wins the fight by decision alone, and a further 18% chance that he gets the win by submission. I'd say that's a valid evaluation of the fight because he's not known for his knockout power anyway. It should be a great fight though. So from pros favoring the Brazilian to his thirst for revenge, that was why Brandon Moreno is going to destroy Alexandre Pantoja.